Emergency rescue crews, state wildlife agents, and civilian volunteers are working around the clock in a desperate race against time across central Louisiana. The slow-moving, stalled remnants of Tropical Storm Arthur have unleashed what meteorologists are calling a once-in-a-thousand-years rainfall event, plunging the town of Plushville and its neighboring communities into an unprecedented state of emergency. With floodwaters completely swallowing critical infrastructure, major highways, and hundreds of residential properties, local leaders warn that the full extent of the devastation may not be known for days. Governor Jeff Landry has officially declared a state of emergency for Avoyelles Parish, alongside 5 surrounding jurisdictions, freeing up National Guard resources, state funding, and emergency tactical assets to assist the thousands of residents currently trapped or displaced by the rising tides. The catastrophic flooding was triggered by a highly volatile combination of meteorological anomalies. Tropical storm Arthur made landfall along the Gulf Coast earlier in the week, carrying an enormous plume of deep atmospheric moisture drawn from abnormally warm equatorial waters. As the system tracked inland towards central Louisiana, it collided with a dense, stationary high-pressure ridge situated over the mid-Atlantic and upper Midwest. This atmospheric roadblock completely halted the forward progress of the tropical depression, causing it to stall directly over Avoyelles Parish and the surrounding low-lying delta terrain. Between the morning of June 18th and the evening of June 19th, 2026, the sky literally opened. Rainfall rates exceeding 3 to 4 inches per hour were recorded continuously over consecutive blocks of hours. By the time the primary convective bands began to fragment, local rain gauges registered staggering totals. Plushville Central, 30.4 inches, Moreauville West, 28, 7 inches, Simisport Delta, Edge, 27.2 inches, Cottonport Lowlands, 26.5 inches. These figures threaten Louisiana's all-time state rainfall records. Because the region had already experienced several weeks of intermittent summer thunderstorms, the topsoil was fully saturated, possessing zero capacity to absorb the deluge. As a result, 100% of the falling rain immediately converted into violent surface runoff, filling localized drainage ditches, coulees, and bayous far beyond their maximum volumes. In the historic town of Plushville, the transformation from a quiet, rural community to an expanse of open, churning water occurred over the course of just a few hours. Initially, early National Weather Service assessments estimated that roughly 25 homes inside the immediate town limits had taken on water. However, as local emergency personnel and neighborhood networks managed to cross-verify addresses, that number skyrocketed. At least 140 homes and businesses within and immediately surrounding the Plushville municipal boundaries have been breached by floodwaters. Water depths inside residential structures range anywhere from a few inches in elevated homes to upwards of 4 to 5 feet in low-lying properties. Major thoroughfares like Louisiana Highway 1181 and Highway 107 have turned into fast-flowing rivers, scattered with stalled, half-submerged vehicles abandoned by drivers during the initial onslaught of the flash flood. Power lines have dipped dangerously close to the water line in several neighborhoods, forcing utility companies to proactively cut electricity grids to prevent widespread electrocution hazards, leaving the completely isolated town in total darkness overnight. The disaster is far from confined to Plushville. The low-lying topography of Avoyelles Parish has created a domino effect, with floodwaters draining from one community straight into the next. Below is a detailed breakdown of the situation across the most severely impacted areas. Situated near the confluence of the Atchafalaya and Mississippi rivers, Simisport is facing a dual threat from both localized flash flooding and severe river backwater accumulation. The sheer volume of rain has caused small streams feeding into the Atchafalaya to back up aggressively. Neighborhoods on the northern and western flanks of Simisport are entirely underwater. Water has crept up onto structural foundations along the main commercial corridors, and boat rescues are actively underway to evacuate elderly residents who chose to ride out the initial storm. but found themselves trapped as the water continued to rise well past midnight. Moreauville has experienced catastrophic drainage failure. The local bayou networks, which typically carry runoff away from residential zones, crested over their banks early on June 19th, pushing an immense wall of water into local subdivisions. Dozens of brick and wood frame homes have suffered severe interior damage. Despite its own internal struggles, Moreauville has become a focal point for the regional emergency response due to the positioning of its municipal infrastructure. Known for its rich agricultural surroundings and historic downtown layout, Cottonport has seen its lower-lying agricultural fields transformed into massive, inland lakes. Hundreds of acres of vital seasonal crops have been completely ruined under several feet of standing, muddy water. The historic commercial sector has seen water seep through sandbag barriers, affecting local storefronts, municipal offices, and storage facilities. Main access roads connecting Cottonport to the rest of the parish are currently impassable to standard vehicles. While the higher ground areas of Mansoura have avoided the worst of the deep residential structural flooding, the outer rural corridors and connecting roads have suffered massive erosion. Culverts have washed out completely, leaving deep, invisible craters beneath the murky floodwaters, making any attempt to drive through flooded streets an incredibly lethal gamble. The Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, LDWF, has deployed a large flotilla of search and rescue flatboats, asset-reinforced airboats, and high-water transport vehicles into the Plushville area. They are joined by local fire departments, police officers, and an informal army of civilian volunteers, affectionately known across the state as the Cajun Navy. These volunteers arrived with their own personal hunting and fishing boats, utilizing GPS tracking and social media distress calls to locate stranded families. Rescuers have had to navigate highly hazardous waters filled with floating debris, submerged cars, hidden fences, and displaced local wildlife, including displaced venomous snakes and fire ant colonies that form floating mats on the water surface. Dozens of families, many clutching small children, pets, and a few plastic bags filled with basic necessities, have been pulled from rooftops, truck beds, and attic windows. For those who have lost everything, immediate relief has been established via coordinated emergency efforts. The American Red Cross, in absolute synchronization with local parish officials, has stood up multiple refuge points. The Moreauville Community Center. This location was quickly converted into a primary shelter, outfitted with hundreds of cots, emergency medical triage stations, and hot food distribution lines. The Cochon de l'Aie Center in Mansoura, serving as a secondary mega shelter and the central command briefing point for Avoyelles Parish Emergency Management. This center is accommodating hundreds of displaced residents from Plushville and surrounding rural communities. Volunteer medical professionals are on site to distribute critical prescriptions to elderly evacuees who were forced to flee their homes without their life-saving medications. Local officials are blunt about the sheer scale of the recovery timeline that lies ahead. Avoyelles Parish Police jury members noted in an early morning press briefing that the parish's infrastructure has suffered a devastating blow that will take months, if not years, to fully repair. We are looking at a complete overhaul of our local drainage philosophy, stated one emergency coordinator. When you get an entire year's worth of rain dropped onto a completely flat agricultural delta in less than 2 days, there is no engineered system on Earth that can simply make that volume of water disappear. It has to sit, and it has to slowly find its way out through overtaxed river channels. The immediate concern for the next 48 to 72 hours is shifting from the rain itself to a secondary silent threat: extreme summer heat. While the core remnants of Tropical Storm Arthur are finally drifting eastward toward the Atlantic coastline, a massive heat dome is moving in right behind it. The National Weather Service has issued an urgent heat advisory for central Louisiana, forecasting ambient temperatures to surge into the mid-90s, which, when combined with the staggering amount of standing surface water evaporation, will push heat index values to a suffocating 104 degrees Fahrenheit to 109 degrees Fahrenheit. For hundreds of residents stuck in homes without electricity, or for emergency workers operating heavy rescue equipment in high water zones, this extreme heat introduces a severe risk of heat exhaustion, dehydration, and heat stroke. Furthermore, standing water combined with high summer heat creates a perfect breeding ground for massive mosquito swarms, raising immediate public health concerns regarding vector-borne illnesses in the weeks ahead. Furthermore, because of the basin-like nature of the local geography, environmental engineers warn that floodwaters in Plushville and Simisport will recede at an excruciatingly slow pace. It could take up to a week or more of completely dry weather before water levels drop low enough to allow building inspectors and insurance adjusters to safely enter the impacted zones and begin assessing the structural integrity of the flooded foundations. State and parish authorities have issued a stringent set of guidelines for the general public as the emergency transition phase begins. Do not attempt to drive through any flooded roadways. A significant percentage of flash flood fatalities occur when vehicles are swept away or stall out in seemingly shallow water that conceals missing pavement or profound currents. Avoid any direct, unnecessary contact with standing floodwaters. The runoff contains toxic agricultural chemicals, overflowed raw sewage from compromised septic systems, and dangerous wildlife. Those looking to aid the displaced families of Plushville, Morrowville, Simisport, and Cottonport are encouraged to make direct financial contributions or donate non-perishable food items, clean bottled water, diapers, and hygiene products directly to the American Red Cross or localized food banks operating out of the Cochon de Layet Center in Mansoura. Meanwhile, an unprecedented meteorological convergence on Thursday, June 18, 2026, left a trail of destruction across Jefferson Parish, Louisiana. Driven by the outer bands and moisture-rich remnants of post-tropical storm Arthur, the region was battered by twin EF1 tornadoes, continuous straight-line winds exceeding 90 miles per hour, and a catastrophic deluge that dropped up to 10 inches of rain in less than 3 hours. From the industrial corridors of Avondale on the West Bank to the residential suburbs of Metairie and the commercial arteries of Kenner on the East Bank, the parish is grappling with a multi-million-dollar recovery crisis. Over 18,000 residents lost power, dozens of homes were structurally compromised, critical rail infrastructure was upended, and major transportation routes to Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport were submerged. The disaster began brewing in the early morning hours of June 18, 2026, post-tropical storm. Arthur, which had made landfall along the Gulf Coast before losing its tropical characteristics, stalled over southeastern Louisiana. While the system was no longer classified as a hurricane, its core remained packed with deep tropical moisture and intense rotational shear. National Weather Service, NWS, radar stations in Slidell detected extreme low-level wind shear over the Mississippi River Delta at approximately 2:15 a.m. A fast-moving squall line interacted with a warm, unstable marine layer pushed inland from the Gulf of Mexico. This interaction created an environment highly conducive to brief, intense, and rapt tornadoes hidden within torrential downpours. At the same time, a phenomenon known as training, where successive storms move over the same area like cars on a train track, developed over the east bank of Jefferson Parish. Meteorologists recorded rain rates of 3 to 4 inches per hour. This volume completely overwhelmed the regional drainage network, which is designed to handle roughly 1 inch of rain in the first hour and a half inch per hour thereafter. By 5 a.m., total accumulations across Metairie and Kenner reached between 8 and 10 inches, turning streets into dangerous, fast-flowing canals. The first major structural casualties occurred on the west bank of the Mississippi River, where a localized mesocyclone dropped a confirmed EF1 tornado at approximately 3:05 a.m. The tornado touched down near the industrial sector of Avondale, packing maximum sustained winds of 90 miles per hour. It carved a narrow but highly destructive path directly through a residential pocket along the 500 block of George Street. At least 4 residential homes suffered total structural failure. Roofs were completely ripped off, and exterior walls buckled under the negative pressure of the vortex. 10 additional homes sustained moderate to severe damage, including broken windows, missing siding, and penetration by airborne debris. In a harrowing display of the storm's power, an unoccupied mobile home was lifted entirely off its brick foundations. The winds carried the structure approximately 40 feet through the air before slamming it into an adjacent modular home. The impact crushed the roofline of the modular home, trapping a family of 3 inside their bedroom until emergency crews could cut them loose. As trees were uprooted and foundations shifted, a major underground natural gas line was ruptured on George Street. An active hissing leak prompted an immediate high-stakes evacuation of a 2-block radius by the Jefferson Parish Fire Department. Utility crews worked in pitch-black conditions and driving rain to isolate and cap the leak before an explosion could occur. Further east on the West Bank, straight-line winds and intense microbursts battered the community of Harvey. Along Lapalco Boulevard, commercial signage was twisted into scrap metal. Several strip malls suffered roof damage, allowing rainwater to flood retail interiors. Near the Harvey Canal, industrial warehouses reported sheet metal siding being torn away, exposing heavy machinery to the elements. Shortly after the West Bank touched down, the severe weather cell crossed the Mississippi River, intensifying as it reached the densely populated communities of the East Bank. At 3:18 a.m., a second EF1 tornado touched down in Metairie, carrying winds peaked at 95 miles per hour. The tornado first made landfall near Harrimaw Court, an industrial and commercial cul-de-sac. The most significant structural impact occurred at the Republic Services recycling facility. The 95-mile-per-hour winds tore through the building's exterior, ripping away massive corrugated steel walls and exposing the sorting machinery inside. Debris from the facility, including compressed recyclable materials and metal framing, was scattered across a half-mile radius. Adjacent commercial properties suffered extensive roof breaches, leading to immediate interior flooding as the torrential rain poured through the exposed ceilings. The historic country club along Airline Highway stood directly in the path of the vortex. The storm demolished a substantial section of the club's heavy wooden perimeter fencing, throwing large splinters across the roadway. Centuries-old oak trees lining the property were either snapped at the trunk or entirely uprooted, blocking multiple lanes of traffic on Airline Highway. A sequence of 7 high-voltage utility poles along the highway were snapped like toothpicks, bringing live wires down onto the wet asphalt and creating a highly hazardous zone for early morning commuters. The most visually striking demonstration of the tornado's strength occurred at the Canadian Pacific Kansas City, CPKC, New Orleans Yard, located near the Jefferson-Orleans Parish line. The tornado struck a line of stationary, empty freight cars. The intense lateral force of the 95-mile-per-hour winds overturned 13 massive rail cars, derailing them and slamming them onto their sides along the tracks. The derailed cars blocked a primary rail artery through the New Orleans metropolitan area. Rail operators and engineers were forced to bring in heavy-duty crane systems to upright the multi-ton cars, an operation that ground regional freight logistics to a halt for over 36 hours. Kenner's drainage infrastructure, despite recent upgrades, was completely helpless against the 10 inches of rain that fell in a concentrated 2-hour window. The city's canal networks reached maximum capacity within 45 minutes of the storm's onset. By 4 a.m., water had jumped the banks of municipal drainage ditches, spilling directly into residential neighborhoods and commercial zones. Major thoroughfares, such as Williams Boulevard, Esplanade Mall paths, and West Esplanade Avenue, quickly transformed into deep, impassable lakes. Water depths in certain intersections exceeded 3 to 4 feet. Dozens of early shift workers and late-night commuters found themselves trapped as their engines stalled in the rising waters. Over 45 vehicles were completely submerged or abandoned throughout Kenner. Emergency responders utilized high-water vehicles and flat-bottomed boats to rescue drivers perched on the roofs of their cars. The flooding in Kenner created a significant regional economic and logistical bottleneck by cutting off access to Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport. Terminal Drive, the primary access artery leading to the airport terminals from Interstate 10, was deeply flooded. The underpasses beneath the interstate junctions collected runoff rapidly, trapping several rental cars and shuttle buses. While the airport runways themselves remained operational due to heavy-duty dedicated pumping stations, the facility became an island. Passengers and airline crews could neither enter nor leave the airport. This structural isolation resulted in the cancellation of over 60 scheduled flights and delayed hundreds of others, disrupting travel plans across the country.
Kind of cool.